Salts, 4 great nieces, Katie Grimes, Paige Salts, Gracie Salts, and Abigail Salts. Lee worked for the Reichhold Chemical Company for 30 years and retired as a supervisor. He was a very active member here at Countryside Christian Church. In fact, I think the only position Lee never held here at the church was that of being the janitor. He also taught the Alpha and Sunday School class. He was a youth leader, and he enjoyed taking kids on mission trips during the summer. Lee most certainly had a servant heart, and his presence here will be greatly missed. Lee loved to fish, hunt, square dance, bowl, golf, play cards, just to mention a few of the things he did. He loved stimulating conversations and light debates, especially when he could take the antagonist position. Lee most certainly was a unique person. And just think of how many lives this man touched. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear calling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and me within my heart is singing, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I'd stay in the garden with him, though the night around me be falling, but he bids me go through the voice of woe, his voice to me is calling, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there,
none other has ever known.
I would venture to say that all y'all have known Lee longer than have I. But in the 3 years and the 7 months that I was blessed to know Lee, he quickly became one of my favorite sinners. Let me explain that. According to Scripture, we are all sinners, saved by God's grace. Lee just happened to be one of my favorite ones. I have made lots of friends here at Countryside that I am honored to call my favorite sinners. Lee had an amazing outlook on life. Did you know that in his lifetime, Lee had 17 major surgeries that ranged everywhere from open heart surgery to replace a leaky heart valve to hip replacements to having one kidney removed because of cancer, just to mention a few. Now, if that isn't amazing enough, the other day, Kathy and Ron shared with me that in all those surgeries, Lee was never nervous, never concerned about the outcome. He always had a very positive outlook that things would just simply work out for the best. Lee loved his family, and he was always ready to help family and friends out with little projects. He was fortunate enough to have met Willie Swim in Ullman, Missouri. They were the perfect match for each other, loving to travel together and square dance together. Their travels took them to Colorado, back to the Lake of the Ozarks, Jefferson City, lots of other places, anywhere they wanted to go in their pop-up camper. Lee recently took a very special trip to Washington, D.C. to see his nephew retire from the U.S. Army. If you were here for Millie's funeral, you may remember hearing Greg sing. And if you ever heard him sing, you would never forget it. Bill shared with me the other day that Lee always was an optimist, always looking on the bright side of things and not looking at what could go wrong, but what should go right. I wish I could do that. Karen Ogden shared a story with me the other day, yesterday, in fact, that I would like to share with you because I feel it sums Lee up nicely. Lee was on the property committee here, and a special meeting of that committee was held to discuss the possibility of a major remodel to the front of the church to make it a little more welcoming and inclusive. The proposal involved making a circular drive with a covered portico, allowing people to drop off passengers very near the front door, out of the weather, and on a nice level surface. Needless to say, that would be a major expense as well as a major change to the way the front of the church looked. Change, there's that dirty word that we don't like to talk about in church. The discussions were long and there were diverse views. It would cost more than we could afford, someone said. It would not look good, somebody else said. You know how those discussions go. The committee decided to take a little break. And as the people were getting up to leave, Lee said, "Why don't we just paint the front door red and put out a pineapple? That should let everybody know we're a welcoming church." That was Lee's sense of humor. Now I'd like to ask Alan to come up and share some things of his feelings of Lee.
God and country. duty, service. Those are a few words that will always make me think of Lee. You know, we've heard the stories. He was a sergeant in the U.S. Army, 10 years of the reserves. And when it comes to service, he was one of God's greatest servants. He served many years here, which have been talked about, from chairman of the board to an elder to a deacon to leader of those groups and everything in between. One of my favorite memories of Lee as a disciple of God is his portrayal of Matthew in the reenactment of the Living Supper, or the Last Supper, the living version of the Last Supper, which he did for well over a decade. Lee was a teacher. We know that he taught Bible study, Alpha Bible Study here at Countryside. Lee was also a certified instructor of CPR, and he taught for the American Red Cross. In the latter part of his 30-year career at Reichhold Chemical, he was a trainer and on their training staff and taught younger people as they were coming into the business. One of the other words I think about when I think about Lee is Lee was a giver. Lee didn't accumulate or live his life with the purpose of accumulating a lot of great possessions or things, but those things that he had, he shared. And one of those things that he shared a lot of was the pop-up camper that Roger talked about, that Melody and Lee traveled in. Not only did he share it by taking people on trips with them, but he also let other people use it to take trips that would create memories for their families. Our family benefited from that. We had 2 weeks in that pop-up camper back to, out to California and back, and saw all kinds of great sights in between, from the Petrified Forest to the Grand Canyon, and a trip that I really don't think would have been possible without Millie and Lee and the generosity of that pop-up camper. You want to have fun with it, and you give it back to the parents, so you don't have to worry about those things. And the uncle privilege is something that comes in between, because you don't have to wait as long and become old to be grandparents. You get it as soon as one of your siblings has children. And it doesn't come with all the responsibilities that we have as parents. And just one personal story that will illustrate what I'm talking about. I was not unlike any other 16-year-old red-blooded American male who was really looking forward to having his own car. And I like to drive my car fast. Don Hamner's in the room, he could testify to that. And my mom and dad would, do everything that normal parents would do and try and correct my behavior and teach me the responsibilities and all that other kind of stuff. And then Lee would exercise the uncle privilege, because somewhere in the next week or two, then he'd come over and say, well, how fast could you get that car to go anyways? But he always had to be judicious when he exercised this, because he knew if he led anybody off the path too far, that we'd come back around and we would corrupt the children of the uncle that was exercising the privilege, and he didn't want us to take Kathy too far off the beaten path. Lee was an active man. You've heard stories about his hunting trips, his fishing trips, games of cards, and in his later years he played golf. And on every hunting trip, Lee'd get a bird or two, and on every fishing trip, Lee'd catch a few, and every now and again he'd win a hand of cards or win a pot in the poker game. And just like most of us with golf, in every round there was that one shot that would keep you coming back for more. But the truth of the matter is, Lee really wasn't very good at any of these things. And you ask yourself, well, why did he do it? Because he, and it comes down to one reason. He did it for fellowship. Lee was about fellowship. And if you enjoyed any of these activities, and I know that a lot of you did with Lee, then I know that you enjoyed his fellowship, and I promise you that he enjoyed yours. The last thing I'll say when I think about Lee is Lee was a lover. And if you need an example of what the vows of matrimony look like, you don't have to look any farther than Lee and how he lived his life with Millie. Lee was also a fierce lover and protector of Kathy. I know that they leaned on each other very much over the last 2 years in mourning Millie's passing, and grew closer, and their love grew stronger. Lee loved people in general. He always had kind words to say about people. He was always positive. And I don't think you can live a life that Lee lived where somebody like me can stand up here and talk about service, teaching, giving, seeking and providing fellowship to others without loving people. So if you're in this room, there was room in Lee's heart for you. And I'd ask you to hold that today as we gather in fellowship. And I'd ask you to carry that forward as we leave and we all go about our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Are there any other family members or friends here that would like to share their thoughts of Lee?
Unlike my dad, I don't have it printed out nice and neat, so I'm going to have to use my phone. But as I have found out, the last time I talked to Uncle Lee was on his Bluetooth-connected hearing aid, so I don't think he would mind.